You're not supposed to show your hand, Dan.
And I'm not a great judge of what men look like.
I always raise the bar or plummet the score.
He came back as a spirit, and he used up all of his ghostliness, and then he was evaporated.
I don't want a passport,
everything
no
he
problem.
did, he was like,
There were babies on that train.
Business, man. Was he unnecessary? Absolutely.
he can't act. He's not Scottish. He can't sword fight. He's legally blind.
Mongoose movie madness, it's a sight to behold. Mongoose passion for films never grows old. So from classics to new releases, he's in the know. Mongoose movies, let's start the show.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to R Rating, the show where me and two of my friends talk about an entire movie franchise. We're going to break it down by movie, give it an overall score, and then place it on the board and see where it lands on the list of franchises. Now, this is only episode 2, so it's only going to have one other thing to compare to, but over time, that board is going to get pretty full, and it'll be pretty interesting to see where things land. I'm going to introduce you guys to Will and Brian. All right, now today we're taking the audience's choice and going with the Highlander franchise. Now, we're not going to do the entire franchise because, my God, there is so much content here to take over, and I just don't have that much time in my life. So we're only going to talk about the 4 movies that were theatrically released. Now, there is a video game, a TV show, comic book, animes. There is a lot in this franchise, which is baffling. But the only thing we're going to discuss is those 4 movies. Highlander 1 comes out in 1986. Now, this is a movie with a budget of $16 million, and I believe that is adjusted for inflation, but I'm not 100% on that because details about this movie are a little bit spotty to find. But it makes only a $5.9 million return at the home theater. Now, my understanding, this is probably a bit of a cult classic, but that's a pretty major loss to start a franchise. It's impressive to me that they even got a sequel, let alone everything else that came after this one. But it sounds like this movie is pretty well beloved by audiences, at least at the time in the mid-'80s, if not by, the audiences in the 2000s and 2020s that we're living in currently. Do you hear much about this movie ever? Like, does this come up in any conversations other than the one classic line, "There can be only one"?
I mean, "Who wants to live forever" is also pretty classic.
I'm not gonna lie, I completely forgot that song had words.
Oh, yeah.
I just remember the tune, the melody to it. And as soon as you started singing, I was like, oh my God. That's absolutely right. I forgot about that. Oh,
yeah.
Wow.
I mean,
It's shocking how close that brought back PTSD just this recently.
You're not supposed to show your hand, Dan.
I know, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I think maybe people our age-ish who grew up and maybe saw this younger and was like, wow, this is awesome. Like immortals battling to the death with swords. Pretty cool concept for an action movie when you're, 10, 12 years old.
Yeah.
So I think maybe people our age-ish around that time probably reminisce about this movie a little bit time to time, but I don't know how many are rewatching this movie.
It definitely probably caught the attention of the 80s hairband genre kind of thing. Like, there's lots of tie-ins, especially for the first 3 movies with that, the music, the hair, a lot of the feel of these movies felt like it was trying to capture some of that fire, if you will, from the late 80s.
The 80s cheese ball wonderment, a spectacle, I guess is the word.
Mm-hmm.
It's a spectacle.
Yeah. Now, it started off as a book franchise, or at least a book, and then it was transferred over to the movie screens. And I have to say, like, from a plot perspective, just from the idea of it, it is actually a pretty fun idea. Like, just the idea that there are mortals living among us, hosting their own little wars that we don't really know anything about, all vying for the championship, or the prize, as it is revealed. But they don't really describe what the prize is, and nobody seems to be going for it all that hard. Like, when we meet Conor McGregor, he's just sitting in a wrestling match for some reason, because he definitely looks like he wants to be there.
Can I stop you, Dan?
Must have a sword under his trench coat.
It is Conor McLeod.
Yeah.
Of the McLeods.
Oh, what did I say?
Not McGregor or whatever you just said.
Oh,
Connor, I think he's getting the UFC fighters mixed up in this.
fair enough. My bad. My bad. 2 hours of sleep. We're going with it. All right, Connor McLeod. I should have that somewhere on my screen just so I can remember it. We first find him at a wrestling match for some reason, because again, he doesn't look like he really wants to be there, and ends up getting pulled out aside and gets into a sword fight with another. They're not Highlanders, right? Because he's the Highlanders. They're just immortals. Do they have a term for them?
Immortals is the term that they call them throughout.
I believe in some of the other content that has been made. They do classify some of the others in different ways, but he specifically is of a Highlander immortal.
Gotcha. They fight to the death, and of course, the only way that you can kill a Highlander is to actually remove their head from the body. Now, some of the stories talk about you can destroy the head as well, but it sounds like there was one of the TV shows does explore that, where like they cut the head down like lengthwise, and the person does regenerate from that. So I don't know. They're playing pretty hard and loose with those rules, but decapitation seems to be the one way that like guarantees you don't come back. And then the Highlander who did the killing will gain the power of the Highlander that they killed, making them stronger, giving them the quickening, if you will. All of this, in theory, could be a really interesting, really well done movie, or at least a storyline. As we said, maybe fitting TV shows better than movies because it could be more of like a week-to-week kind of a thing. But from just a storyline perspective, that doesn't sound bad to me.
Yeah.
No, it's not horrible. My problem with it was the initial setup for this movie kind of dictates that it's a one and done movie. And of course, there's 5 films, 2 TV shows, there's a web series, there's an anime, there's mini comics, manga, books, all kinds of stuff. So they change the rules as they go. The rules start to evolve and change. And by the 5th movie, they just completely ignore the rules, completely disavow even the meaning of there can be only one. I really didn't like it. But they tried to fix the problem with they can't make content for this because of the rule that there can be only one. And every movie tries to dictate who that one is. And so they have to evolve that. But this idea of immortals working amongst us was a really cool idea, and I think they probably got to that the best in, I think probably getting some of them mixed up. It would be number 4, the rule set that they had and the numbers of immortals that were milling about throughout society and the world. Like there were a lot in number 4, hundreds, if not thousands of immortals amongst us, playing the game as they started calling it then. And I liked that rule set better than the original rule set, where it felt like there was like 5 or 6 maybe, and you don't even get to see hardly any of them, and they get to the end what felt like really quickly, and it was over with.
Yeah. Well, I believe because the movie was set to be a one and done, right? Like that's the feel you get. So I actually don't mind the way the movie is set up. I like how they go from the past to the present, and you get to little bits, and you learn how the game works and what their lives are about as the movie unfolds.
Right.
But I had the feeling that it was set at the gathering time, which is the big finale when all the immortals die and one is crowned.
They're all drawn to this one location to have their final
battle. It made
battle.
sense that there was only 3 or 4 immortals at that time for that movie. And it concluded in a proper way, I suppose. It's just when Hollywood.
We're trying really hard. Today.
No, it's just that when
until we get to this
when Hollywood goes in and says, "Okay, people like this," which I don't know who decided that. Let's make more. That's when problems arise, right? Because it's a fixed one and done story that you then have to expand out in some way.
Yeah. Well, and they do an interesting thing, which is in the second one. We're jumping ahead just a tiny bit. Where in the second one it starts off where he did actually win the prize in the first movie,
right?
And
like he does to gain the knowledge of all men or whatever. Like
yeah. Well, they kind of changed what the prizes, I think,
number of times, I believe.
Right. And I think that's kind of why he helped build the shield in number 2, because he had this wisdom of how to solve that problem.
Okay. Can I guide us into going movie to movie here a little bit, just to kind of get us, because we're kind of all over the place.
Please. I want to hear your take on how this plays
Sure,
out.
sure.
I'm curious.
Just because I want to start by saying, let's focus on Highlander, and I'll have Brian start. Can you let us know what are the rules? What do you feel the rules are? What the Immortals are doing, and how the whole game works?
So I have no idea why they exist.
Okay, fair.
No idea why the Immortals exist or how they come about. And keep in mind, I'm focusing on Highlander 1 because rules change and evolve as the series goes on. We either get answers or some idea or whatever. But in Highlander 1, there's no explanation as to why or when an immortal is born, and no reasoning as to why Sean Connery wants to help
Connor
McLeod, right? Connor McLeod, Ramirez wants to help McLeod. There's no reasoning for that. He just wants to be a nice guy. There's no explanation of why they can like feel each other's presence or how they find each other. They know that they're supposed to be drawn to each other in a final match at the end. And we don't know where or why that's. And then the prize is not really explained until toward the end of the movie, where it's basically stated that it'll be you'll be able to encompass the wisdom of all of man. Like you'll be able to get everybody like not straight up read minds, but understand all the wisdom there is to know.
I think more than that, you can actually influence the mind of men.
Okay. I didn't get that myself, but I'm not going to go against it because it was very ambiguous waters we were wading through. Now, one thing that I wasn't sure of was, would they lose their immortality once they became the one?
I believe
that was never stated
in the first movie. It's not stated. I don't believe
it's not. In the second movie, it was and of course that was muddy too. Let's try to stay out of one here, but that's kind of what I got it. Bunch of people out of nowhere are born with immortality, and as they go about, they start to figure out they can't be killed, and that they start being drawn to each other for some unknown reason, and they need to cut each other's heads off.
Yeah.
I will step there one second. It's not that they can't be killed. It's when they're killed, that's when they become the immortal or whatever it is. Like that's when their power awakens within them. So they need to be killed.
Oh, I missed that.
Okay. Yeah, they need that. They need to.
I see.
Because you see him die on the battlefield, and he wakes up being like, "Why? What's going on? How am I here? What is happening?" Yeah. I don't know that they explain it super well in the first movie, but that is, even if it's not explained until later on in the franchise, it doesn't break canon in the way that they do it, like most other things in this franchise do.
Okay, was there anything you wanted to add, Dan, to what you believe the rules or how they work in the Highlander first movie?
Are you leading this down a path because you actually know?
No. I just wanted to see
knowledge.
I just wanted to see how clear or unclear it was, and on top of that, after I just want to ask, was that enough for this movie?
Okay.
Did they give you enough for this movie to be like, okay, yeah, you can make a movie out of this?
Fair enough. So if you're walking into this completely blind in 1986, I don't know that is there narration? I don't remember. Is there narration at the very beginning saying anything, or do you literally just get thrown into that wrestling match?
It's Sean Connery, and he like reads a little quote, and that's it.
Okay. You do get something before the first battle with swords for no reason. Excuse me. I think Brian touched on most of it pretty well. I do agree. Like I ran into a bunch of the same issues he did, where I'm like, as soon as Ramirez shows up, I'm like, why if he has to kill him because there can be only one, why is he training him how to be a better warrior before he inevitably kills? Like, does he want the challenge of it? Is he so bored he doesn't care about the prize so much as he just wants somebody to live through the ages with? Like, what is his motivation? And the movie never really gives us anything on that I'm aware of. Right? He just kind of shows up one day and is like, hey, I'm a Spaniard with a Scottish accent who lives in Egypt, and you're like, none of this makes sense.
I think that's why so many of the other movies, like, they try to explore some of the reasoning to these seeds of questions that we had from the first one. They try to like give reasoning to it. Later on, we have not the Citadel, the Sanctuary, which is like, hey, this is why people might be friends, you know? And we can get to that later. But yeah, I think to say that there enough for me walking into this in 1986, bunch of dudes fighting sword fights and stuff to rule the world with some rock music. Yeah, okay. All right.
I do like the fact that you're not allowed to fight on hallowed ground or on
Holy ground. Yeah.
holy land. Although I wish that they'd actually done that, because it feels like they break that a couple of times and there's no consequences for it whatsoever. But what I would have liked even more is the gathering. Instead of it being like, oh, this is the end time for the immortals, if the gathering had been more like no, every 5 years we're drawn to each other and we have to kill. But then like in the meantime, no bueno. And that would kind of give you a good reason for why there is this gap where you're not attacking people. Because even in the first movie, Clancy Brown's character, whose name I'm blanking on, is it Krull or
Kurgan.
Attacks the McLeod castle, kills Ramirez. Spoilers for a 40-year-old movie. Looks like he's going to kidnap Mrs. McLeod, and then you just cut to like a little bit later, and they're like Connor and his wife. For some reason, she's still alive. I don't really understand that, and they're still living in the same location. So like, it's not like they had to run away from Clancy Brown or whatever. Like, they're still living in the exact same spot. You can see the castle in the background. She's alive. And you're just like, I don't understand any of this. Like, why did he not just wait around for him to show up if his goal is to kill him? And now he's killed Ramirez, so he's stronger.
Plot holes like this, yes.
Oh, for sure. But like, I would have thought,
riddled with regular old plot holes where stuff just doesn't make sense in a moment-to-moment basis.
Oh, I totally get it. But I would have thought he'd be like, okay, cool. Like, I'm going to take you and run away now because I want you to survive. And instead, they're just like, nah, we're just going to chill here. Like, we're good.
Well, his wife didn't mention to McLeod, her husband. She didn't mention to her husband that she was raped by Kurgan. She never mentioned that to him, so maybe he didn't quite understand what happened. I don't know. Maybe she gave him a different story. We weren't really told that. We were just told that she was raped and she didn't say anything to him.
So yeah, okay. I think a lot of this is, from what I understand, when this movie was made, it was based on a gentleman who wrote this script story in college. It's like one of his first scripts. So again, like early development writing. So to me, I felt Sean Connery's whole purpose, which didn't make sense because immortals are supposed to be off in each other's heads, was to further explain what immortals are and how everything works. He's simply a plot device for this very minimal plot.
Carrying the movie, by the way. That plot device carried the movie. He was the redeeming quality of the film for me. Though he didn't make any sense, I am so glad he was there because I was entertained by him and his character.
Absolutely. A lovable character. Well played, with who knows why he ever agreed to it. But I mean,
that's exactly what I was just about to say. Like, did he lose a bet? Was he hard up for money? Like, the IRS can call him? Like, what's going on?
And then I felt similar to Connor's wife. That was just like she didn't tell him anything, so that later he has more reason to win this fight at the end of the movie, right? Another plot device kind of reveal.
Yeah.
Okay, so the movie's kind of a mess.
We're talking
Is that what we're feeling? But
yeah,
the
franchise is kind of
as a fantastical 80s action rocker movie, can we tell a little bit about what we loved about this movie?
It'll be a short show.
That's fine. And then we can get to the ratings and maybe what you didn't like and why you're rating it is what it is.
Go for it. If you got something positive to say, that'll be.
I think we already mentioned Sean Connery was a standout in this movie. The moment he enters the screen in his amazing outfit, you just instantly are drawn to this character and want to know.
That bright red regalia that he has, like, it just accentuated his vibrant character, right? Like, he came out and was completely contrasted to this movie with his vibrance and lovability.
Absolutely. And I believe, like, partly his character warranted, but it just felt like he didn't care what this movie's about. He was just having fun with that character. And it just happened that's what that character was, right? So I feel like he was a highlight. And I feel like Queen doing music for this movie is an absolute highlight. And it's apparent because it comes back time and time again throughout the franchise. I just love that a band as amazing as Queen would sit down and write songs for this wild idea of a movie. So that's what I thought was good. Aside from that, I think it hits the mark when it comes to action movies. You know, there's sword fights throughout. Are they good? Maybe not.
No.
But
No.
okay. I'll tell you a little. I don't know if you guys know this or not. This movie came out in '86, as Dan mentioned, and another movie, which has been renowned for great sword fights. The Princess Bride came out in '87, 1 year later. Now, the swordmaster and stunt coordinator were one and the same for both movies.
Interesting.
Their names are Peter Diamond was the stunts and Bob Anderson, and they have worked on an incredible list of movies: Star Wars, Indiana Jones, The Mask of Zorro, Lord of the Rings, Princess Bride, Highlander. Like, they know what they're doing, and I'm guessing you both agree that Princess Bride has some pretty fantastic sword fighting in it.
Excellent.
So here's the rub. Why is Highlander's sword fights just not up to par? Christopher Lambert is extremely nearsighted, almost legally blind. So
he has thick lenses, and
he can't wear contact lenses. So he had to learn all the fights, very different than any normal person. And I think it took away greatly from the action in this movie.
Yes. And they covered it with terrible cinematography too. You have a person swinging their sword going, ah, and then they cut to another person being flung away from the attack. You never see the sword strikes ever, unless they're doing the most basic little tang, the garbage. It was really horrible. We get these super duper close-up scenes and then somebody flying away. And that is carried out through every single one that Christopher Lambert is a part of, until we get to 4 and 5, where you have a new protagonist who can sword fight. And they still carry it a little bit in 4, but we move away from that. We'll get there.
Yeah, so that's the reason why the idea of the action movie, the idea of these immortals, fighting throughout time, there can only be one, is all very cool and makes for a great idea for a movie. But when you cast somebody who is almost legally blind to do the sword fights, it really kind of falls flat in a bad way.
So the problem I have with that is it actually raises more questions for me in this franchise that I already have so many questions. Number one would be, why would you hire Christopher Lambert, whatever his name, Christopher Lambert, when he can't act, he's not Scottish, he can't sword fight, he's legally blind.
English at the time.
Like, what is the draw to this character? Because, like, again, what Brian just said, like, you've got somebody like Arnold Schwarzenegger, who can also barely speak English in the first couple of movies he did, but is so charismatic that you don't really care that much.
They cast him as a robot in one of his first movies. So
sure, but you know what I'm saying. Like, it works to some extent. Like, at no point did Christopher work for me in these movies, and now you're saying he's also, there's reasons the movie are as bad, and most of them are based on him. Why would they go with, like, is he somebody's cousin or nephew or something?
I think they had like 12 choices at the time.
I think
so.
I mean, they got Sean Connery.
Yeah.
They had some budget.
From what I remember, I remember reading is that the producers saw him or the director saw him in Tarzan, and he was quite physically fit and could move very well, and thought he had a great look for the character. And they didn't know that he, spoke little to no English. He had to learn English for this role, I believe. And that he wasn't able to see. But they, wanted him desperately, so they cast him before ever even knowing.
I have to interject here. I do not find, and I'm not a great judge of what men look like, but I don't find Christopher Lambert to be that attractive of a male lead. And yet they put him in the first two movies. I swear to God, those movies are one step away from a Cinemax porno. Even the sets look like that cheesy, like low budget porn scene. And he's in a bunch of sex scenes, especially in the third movie. He's banging it out all the time. Never takes his shirt off. Was he afraid of sit-ups or something? I just thought Christopher Lambert was a terrible drag on the entire franchise. And I think his name was propelled to epic heights for no reason. I think Sean Connery pushed him up a mountain single-handedly.
I feel like there are scenes where he doesn't have a shirt on. Maybe not the sex scenes, but I feel like there is like a scene where he's walking around with like a kilt and like something over his shoulders, but not a shirt on. But maybe I'm misremembering that, or remembering like promotional material. Either way,
it was unmemorable. Just goes to show that he doesn't have a rockin' bod. And it was like, for as many times as people were getting naked and laying out some hot chicks, they should have cast somebody who was a little bit more spicy in front of the camera.
I love that.
I could have done without those scenes myself, but it was the 80s.
Yeah, it was the 80s.
For sure. I loved, however, that for all three of the first movies that he's in, he's got a very, like, he uses the exact same move on all three of the women, which is to tell them that he's immortal, and instantly
that's it. That's all they need.
Room scene.
In number 2, he's like a 90-year-old dude.
Yep.
Gets the quickening, stands up, and he's like, "I'm immortal," and bangs her out in the alley.
In the alley.
Save it.
Even kidding. It was that fast. It was that fast.
I loved it. When you realize that's his move, you're like, all right, somebody's had 500 years to perfect this.
He knows what works.
Doing.
I mean, I'll counter a little bit. I think he was in good shape when he did Tarzan. I think, what we consider a masculine man to look like was different in mid-80s than it is now.
True.
So I think he was a physically able person, but it is what it is. There was a lot of maybe missteps but I also think that's what led this to be a cult classic, because a lot of people enjoy this movie because of how bad it is. And the other movies got made and watched. It got made and watched, the franchises because of the badness of them, right? The bad Scottish accents, the just furrowed brow for 99% of the movies. There's all these like elements that people just loved, and I fall victim to that as well. I don't know if to call it victim, but I fall into loving those things as well, because there's a fine line for me of a bad movie that's unwatchable and a bad movie that is hilarious to watch and enjoy. Speaking of bad that was hilarious to watch, Clancy Brown's performance as Kurgan was bad, and I enjoyed watching it. He committed as well. Especially when he shaves his head, I was like, this is gold right here. This is so terrible, I'm now enjoying it. So that was a positive for me. I don't think it was intentionally meant to be that bad. But I did kind of get a kick out of his character as a villain. And you can see that they tried to mimic that same villain type throughout the next two movies after it. They copied it, almost identically. Okay, so I spoke about what I enjoyed. You might not have anything that you enjoyed. Maybe we should get to rating this, and if you want to poke more at this movie, that's totally fun too.
Before we move on too far, there's one scene in particular that I just have to touch on. I mean, not like, the training montages I thought were absolutely hilarious, because nothing they're doing would help you in a sword fight whatsoever, including like Kruger at one point has, like, he's sitting with his arms out and he's like rolling the sword between his arms. I'm like, what? When is that going to help you in any way, shape, or form? Like, what is going on right now? But it was just like, whatever. It brought a smile to my face. Connects together. That's not gonna work in a sword fight. You don't stick them together like Legos. But it looked cool. It looked badass. It looked way cool. Yeah. The other scene that it just blew my mind a little bit is right after he meets, I think his name's Brenda. She's walking home down an alley, and he pulls her into a construction site. Do you know what I'm talking about here? Yeah. And he pulls her in. He's like, "Oh, you're in danger." And my brain's like, Kruger has no idea who this chick is. Like, there's no way in heck that she's
Yep.
in any danger
Another
whatsoever.
major plot hole
And by
right
pulling
there.
her in, you've actually put her in danger. Then they get attacked, and within like 8 seconds of the fight starting, there's a police helicopter above them with the light beam on them, just checking in, like, what's going on? I'm like, that guy deserves a goddamn medal. That guy was on the scene instantly.
That's law enforcement for you.
Right? Like, the response team on this one is insane. And it was just one of those, like, I'm going to call it a fun scene because, like, my brain is just exploding with, like, what is happening right now?
It's just kind of like your lights
But
right now.
was-
Your lights are going crazy.
Yeah, thank you, bad guy, or bed guy, sorry, for following. So appreciate you.
One thing that I needed to bring up, and I don't know if I like this or hate it, but it was the early aerial shot. Now, keep in mind, they did not have drones.
Yes,
they didn't have drone cameras back in this. But in the wrestling one, I'm told they literally brought a helicopter into that stadium for that shot. Is that true?
Yeah.
Because
No, I don't believe so.
That's
I believe they actually had a rig system that they invented for this. That they
okay, because it was
Yeah,
amazing. It was
a crane would
amazing
make
they
for
could
more
like
that.
they strung it
To have that kind of an aerial shot swinging over the heads and zoom in on Christopher Lambert sitting up in the nosebleed section. I was watching that and I was like, when was this made? That's incredible that they can pull this shot off. And then they do more of it and more of it and more of it. But it's the open scenes where they're out on the Scottish hillsides and they're going by the cliffs and they do it to death. And then to get worse, they continue to do it in every single movie afterwards. And in number 4, they're doing it in high speed. It's like the helicopter's on crack zipping around. I'm like, this doesn't even look cool. This is terrible.
It's
I don't
legitimately
know what was
taking
going
me
on
out.
with that. Yeah, it was. It was a great opener, and then they should have been done with it.
It's a great, because I hit on the same thing where I'm just like, wow, this is a pretty good shot for what we're doing here. Because there's no drones back then. But also, again, I have no idea why we're at the wrestling match, let alone why they're like creating camera works to make this amazing scene, just to show him looking bored and somehow. Now, here's a question I've got for like the overall series as a whole: are they just carrying swords around everywhere they go? Like, do they just 100% have a sword on them? Is that why they're in trench coats?
Yeah, until 4 when they bring in other useful weapons.
Because like. There's just no security anywhere back in the 80s?
pretty much. But yeah, they were...
Well, with a police force that can respond as fast as they did. He got in his car and couldn't make it out of the parking garage before half of the NYPD surrounded him. Okay? They don't need security, man. They're responding fast.
No, the helicopter, the police. No, that's the other note that I had. At that point, what do the police think they're responding to? Because there's nobody else in the parking lot. They get there and they arrest this guy for like he's going very fast out of what he's probably saying. So I understand, but what do they think they're arresting him for? Because there's no way they know somebody was murdered up there.
I don't know. That was totally out of context. And so was the police dialogue and then the interrogation scene also, right? When they push him up against his car, he says, "Don't move. Don't even breathe." And I'm like, no one says that. And that took me out of the film so fast. I was like, who's writing this script? Then they get into the interrogation scene and the one cop is like, "All right, Connor, tell me what you know." And he's like, "I don't know anything." And he's like, "All right, we found this guy and his sword down below. What do you know about that?" He's like, "I don't know anything. It's a really old sword." Like, he's just telling him everything. It felt like Christopher Lambert was interrogating the police force. It was ridiculous. Then he punches the deputy in the face and they're like, yeah. Let him go. It made no sense. It was ridiculous.
Okay, so other than because I feel like he gets introduced with Brenda and Brenda works with the police force. So other than that aspect, and I apologize, as we'll get into, like I struggled with the ending of this movie. Does the police storyline go anywhere, or do they just eventually just peter out of the movie? Because I feel like there's a lot of scenes with the police early on. You had a couple of detectives. You had scenes with detectives that don't have Brenda or Connor in them. It's just the two cops going back and forth about how they're going to track Connor down. And then I don't remember any resolution to that storyline whatsoever.
I don't.
Did I just miss it?
I don't think it really resolves. I think Brenda helps move it away from Connor and onto probably Kurgan or something. But like again, I feel like it's just a plot device to get Brenda in the sack.
Okay.
Oh, they're blowing up the rooftop and there's not a police officer in sight at the end. You're absolutely right. They waited all the cops at the beginning and then they're just like, yeah, we ran out of cop budget for this movie. So we're just going to let them flood this rooftop, knock this giant sign down, which reappears in the fourth movie, by the way. And then, fall through the windows and blow all the windows out of this building. No police helicopter in sight, nothing. It was, complete. Yeah, it was terrible.
All right, so we've talked about the first movie for quite some time, and I feel like it's probably for good reason, but nonetheless, we should probably rate this thing and move on to the second one. What do you think?
Absolutely.
Okay.
I'll go last.
Want me to start real quick?
Sure, go for it.
Okay, so I went with cinematography, which this movie was real poor. I gave, out of 100, I gave this a 19. It was wonderful with that opening sequence, and then they did it to death. We talked about that. And then these up-close shots trying to cover the fact that they did not have any good choreography with the sword fights at all, and that was terrible. So I really didn't like the cinematography. It was hard for me to watch because I wanted to see what was happening, and I couldn't. Then I had scoring and audio. They had some cool songs. Everybody's mentioning like Queen in chat here, and there were some cool songs. But it was just loud, like rock music for me. And it felt like, okay, they're just trying to catch this kind of brand theme for the film. It wasn't well placed. And the sound effects and the audio of them screaming or the lightning and stuff just sounded really bad. Even for the time, it didn't fit very well. So I gave that a low score as well. Acting and dialogue was absolutely atrocious all around. Sean Connery was the redeeming quality of this film. That's why I gave it 12 points out of 100. That's all Sean Connery. Sean Connery had all 12 of those points out of 100. Everything else was atrocious. Okay,
I thought my score was bad.
And unfortunately, they gave him some pretty dumb lines too. So that was unfortunate. The plot, however, for the 80s out of the gates, I liked this idea. Right. And I did like how they went back and forth. So you had like multiple timelines running simultaneously as you had character development. It was okay. I gave this 40 out of 100, which is pretty generous, but it's better than anything else in the entire franchise, actually. And I felt it kind of moved along, and it was okay. The ideas were okay. They just weren't very well developed. I think as a first attempt at this style of movie and this kind of theme, it was pretty good. But it's still, there could have been so much more to it. And then, of course, the actual plot holes that we've discussed, it's riddled throughout this entire movie. My overall enjoyment started out high. And then when I saw Fazil backflip away from Christopher Lambert, I threw my notepad in the air and I said, forget this movie. And I was so upset with it and I could not enjoy the rest of it. And from then on, I was just watching how much I hated this movie until Sean Connery came by and I went, that's okay.
Nice.
That's it. So out of 100, averaging those scores, I gave this movie a 22 out of 100.
Oh,
Nice.
okay.
Nice.
Okay. I thought the 12 was your total.
That's good.
No. That was just for the acting and dialogue.
Gotcha. Okay.
22 for my total.
Fair enough. So I'm going to
Yes.
go next, and I broke this down similarly by category. For the music, I kind of am trying to figure out how I want to score music just in general. I think what I'm going to start doing is kind of giving the soundtrack like a 50 to start, and then if it either is good, it'll go up, or if it like takes me out of the movie, it'll go down, kind of a thing. Does that make any sense?
Mm-hmm.
Because like there are some times where like you can get through an entire movie and not remember the soundtrack at all, but be like, but that's kind of okay, right? Like that was kind of the issue we were running into with Mad Max, is like if you don't come across the soundtrack as being overly negative, that's actually kind of a positive for the movie, because that means it was just kind of working in the background. Unfortunately, a lot of the music in this, like I am not an 80s hair metal kind of guy. And so a lot of times like they get in the car and like you say, it's just loud. And it's like, it's not good. It's just loud. And it's like, well, now I'm focusing on this instead of whatever is going on screen. So it did kind of take me out a little bit. As much as I loved Do You Want to Live Forever, it's way more of a meme than a good song. So like, it's kind of classic, and I honestly I'm thinking about putting it as a channel redemption point for my channel. So it's kind of like that might happen. But I didn't love it that much. So I gave music a 40. So it's like, it's okay. Like it's serviceable, but it's not good. The cinematography, I agree with you. They were trying some things. Some of it worked out okay. The wide shots didn't bother me as much as they bothered you by the end of the movie. What bothered me is how many times you get the exact same shot 9 times from just a slightly different angle. Like when the glass breaks at the end and you watch the glass break 47 times in a row because they're so impressed with what they did, just felt masturbatory instead of actually good. And I'm just like, okay, guys, we got it. We saw the lightning. We're good. Like, move on. The graphics probably were fine for 1986, but are really hard now. Like, they're really bad by today's standards. So I gave this a pretty low score as well. The acting, I like Sean Connery, and this movie had me questioning if Sean Connery is actually a good actor or if I just really like Indiana Jones. You know what I mean? Like, am I just bringing a lot of goodwill to this character, or is he actually good? And
they didn't give him great lines in this. They didn't, unfortunately.
No. And the thing is, Sean Connery, like, this is the first movie in a franchise. You're not bound by anything. Technically, there's a book. Nobody's read it. Who cares? You can do whatever you want with this. Why the crap don't you just make him a Scottish person and then he just sounds right? Why does he have to be a Spaniard? Why is he living in Egypt? None of these are explained. None of it makes any sense. Like, change the name Ramirez to McGregor. Now he lives down the street. Makes sense for why they would meet, as opposed to he sought him out just to train him. It doesn't make a lick of sense to me that you have a Scottish person playing a Spaniard when you've got a British, I don't even know where Lambert is from, playing a Scottish. Like,
Lambert.
None of it makes any sense to me whatsoever. So the acting, I gave it like a 15. And again, all of that is Sean Connery. The plot, I actually kind of like the idea of this movie. Again, like, from a concept perspective, not necessarily an execution perspective, but from a concept perspective, it's kind of a fun idea. It could very well, like, I saw a lot of stuff when researching this or looking this over about them reviving this franchise, like, from the ground up with Henry Cavill as McLeod. And a part of my brain is like, that's got potential. Like, that could work. I like him. He's a better actor. I don't know if he can do a Scottish accent. We'll find out.
He'll be fine.
But, like, it can't be worse. So, like, all of that is like, okay, the plot's actually kind of okay. I gave that a bit of a pass. Huge holes, so it's not like it got a high score, but I gave a 40, which is like the highest I could give this movie. Entertainment value, as I mentioned, I watched this movie like a year ago, and I don't remember the ending. So I either turned it off and walked away and completely forgot that I'd done that, or I fell asleep during it. But either way, I don't remember the ending. Watching it this time, I swear to God, the amount of times I had to rewind this movie because I kept falling asleep. Yeah. And so when I told you, like, I don't remember if that police plot line went somewhere or not, because I legitimately might have just forgotten to rewind at some point. I honestly don't know. The entertainment on this one is super low. I gave it a 10. I did not enjoy this movie. I have no desire to go back to this one. I'm shocked I watched it 1.5 times in my life. Overall, I gave this a 28.
Nice. All right. Well, bringing in the ringer. We know I always raise the bar or plummet the score. So what is it going to be today? I mean, I don't know
how much lower.
I know. So what do you think? Is this a good movie? No. Is this an entertaining movie? I think so. I think there's a reason why there's so many movies, TV, there's so much media made about this. And I think you guys are right. It's one of the best elements is like the core story of these Eternals, you know, fighting almost endlessly, it seems. And these just like interesting premise that you just can't not enjoy. So I think there's so many like elements of potential in this movie. And when I look through the lens of an 80s cheeseball action, massive practical effects, massive bad CGI effects, and then just like how it became this cult classic, there's merit to that some way. Is it making a good movie? No. Does it let me raise the bar of it a little bit? I think so. And I always tend to give the benefit of the doubt a little bit to the first of a franchise because it's the one that sparked something to allow it to continue and grow into something beautiful or something horrendous. I feel our last episode with Mad Max, it bloomed into something beautiful in the end. And this, not so much, maybe.
We'll see if Cavill takes the role. I don't know. Maybe.
Well, yeah, sure. There's always time, and I think there was good elements along the way that may have been better than this, but there's also a lot of not so much. Anyway, let me say, just at the end, wrap it up with the score, kind of between genre, acting, writing, direction, and if it holds up or did it entertain. I gave it a 35. I gave it a 35 in the end, which is, still a horrible score.
Of those things, what was the high point for you of those things listed? What was the high point?
I think genre, it really fits in. Like the core story of it really fits into action really beautifully. Was the action executed well? There's elements like the practical explosions and crazy stuff that's going on in the movie is
the cars blowing
entertaining
up in the underground parking lot was pretty
the
intense.
Dude flipping down the parkade. You may have hated it and it took you out, but for me, that is action. It's bad, but it's hilarious.
It technically is action.
It's hilarious, and so that's maybe why it's a little higher rated for me, is because it definitely dipped into the line of this is a bad movie, but it's hilariously bad. And so that makes me enjoy it, and I can't help that. It's just who I am. I love bad movies. That's fair. So those kind of things that maybe took other people out, I kind of enjoyed. And was the writing great? No, not overly. Right? Like the dialogue, not great.
Not at all.
But yes.
You're trying so hard to be nice. I appreciate you.
Because again, the core concept of the story is there. That was written, right? Like the immortals, the Highlander, like his love of Scotland and the aerial shots, although overdone, were kind of beautiful, right? And like just like him reliving and the cuts back and forth through time to tell the story, I kind of enjoyed that. And I thought it really gave bones to something that could be good. I just don't think it held up. It just didn't hold up at all. So I gave it a very nice 35, a very giving 35.
All right. Are we on to number 2?
We are on to number 2. I guess before we move on, I will just let you guys know. The first movie has an IMDb score of 7, and we gave it a total of 28. Yep. So pretty far from the mark on that one. And I want to say that's a series high on IMDb.
I think part of that is because
buckle in,
that's partly because it's a cult classic. So a lot of audience are going to go out of their way to rate that on IMDb if they enjoyed it, right?
Yeah.
That happens.
All right. So, Will, you kind of just gave us a little bit of a rundown, but I'm going to let you take the lead on this one because it sounds like you have a better understanding of both parts of the second movie and which one's which and what's going on there. So if you want to lead us off on this one, that would be wonderful.
Thank you, Dan. I would love to. Now, I'm not sure how much Brian knows about this, but there are 2 versions of Highlander 2. And I went out of my way to watch both of them because I'm crazy, 1. And 2, I was not that, just genuinely interested in the difference. So the theatrical release was called Highlander The Quickening. And the major difference, if you are questioning if you watched the right one or not, Dan, is are immortals aliens from the planet Zeist?
I don't remember them having a name to the planet, but we definitely saw them were they in the future and they went back in time, or in the past and they went forward in time?
So they were in the past and went forward in time in the movie you watched. They were on a different on a different planet called Planet Zeist that was futuristic, and they had guns, they were shooting, there were spaceships. If you didn't see any of that,
none of that rings a bell.
Their planet was also dying, right? Their futuristic planet, wasn't it also
dying? It was kind of in a revolution. They were trying to overthrow the power to be, because they were kind of an enslaving people and things like that. But anyway, so the theatrical release, people hated, and part of the reason why it turned out the way it did was the movie went over budget, so the producers took over and they finished the movie. And then once the audiences just razzed on it and hated that the Highlanders were aliens and that's the reason, and they were sent to Earth as a punishment, and there is no the prize at the end is if you are the last immortal, you can come back to the planet Zeist if you choose to. Those are all things that were in this that weren't in the Renegade version that we were required to watch. And anyway, so the director, once all this hate came in for the theatrical release, went in and recut, trying to remove all elements of the aliens and that portion of explaining what the immortals are, which everybody wanted to know from the first one. So come on, you guys, you asked for this.
Did not ask for
no,
that.
they asked for answers and they didn't like the answers. That's a difference. But anyway, so that's why Renegade came to be and is, I guess, favored as the official movie. But let's be honest, the rest of the franchise ignores it's ever existed, so it doesn't matter, right? It doesn't matter that they re-edited it. It doesn't matter that they were aliens because the whole movie's erased from the rest of the franchise.
Another glaring difference from Highlander 2 from the rest of all of the movies and franchise is the shield and the ozone layer. Now, remember that in 1996, was it 96? It was 86. In 1986 was kind of the beginning of the culmination of the destruction of the ozone in reality. And in 87 and 88, it kind of was the peaking. People genuinely thought we were going to die because we were opening up this hole in the ozone layer. It was a very important thing going on in society. And so they brought this element into the movie. And I don't know why, other than it was a hot topic prior to, like, when they started filming this, when they wrote this script, it was a hot topic. But that's it. Otherwise, it has nothing to do with the content of Highlander. Like, it was, completely outlandish. It made it more science fiction than just a fantasy fiction.
Yep.
So I think Dan probably loved this
it
movie. He
felt,
loves sci-fi.
It felt a bit unnecessary for the film, other than to put them in a futuristic state, which didn't feel like it was just a slummy cityscape was all they really did with it.
So I'll agree with you. At the time I was watching it, I was thinking that, but you brought up a good point when we were talking about the last movie, which is that he actually gains the wisdom of all man, or whatever you want to call it. And so this actually does a decent way
to use the wisdom.
Well, I was wondering if this is a way of showing that he actually is legitimately a good person who's using it for the benefit of mankind, right? You jump ahead a little bit. What are you going to do with this immense power that you were given? I'm going to help save everybody. Now, it's used negatively, unfortunately, but that wasn't his intention with it. He wasn't part of the company that was hurting people. He was trying to save people. So maybe that was the intention, is just showing all these other immortals are using it for or want to get the prize for their own nefarious reasons. He legitimately wants to help people. It's just showing that he is actually a good person. Now, do they need to go that far to do it? Probably not. But like you said, it was a hot topic back then that people thought they were going to die from this. Let's have the immortals save us.
Yeah, it makes it feel more real.
Why did they need this evil corporation? Because, so Ramirez comes back. We don't really know why. Ramirez comes back, and why he dies is another mystery. Maybe you guys can explain this to me too. He suddenly gains the Force and then evaporates. But Ramirez comes back and joins him and the girl on this quest of righteousness and goodness or whatever to save humanity and bring down the shield, which he generated in the first place, but it was for good reasons. And then the bad guy, what's the evil guy's name in this? I forget. He joins the evil corporation, and that's his team for the movie, which he ends up killing him anyway. Why did they need the evil corporation? Why? Like, there were so many unnecessary things in this movie to generate some sort of a story. It seemed unnecessary, and it seemed lazy to me.
You're missing the whole alien aspect, Run. They trimmed it for you.
And aliens.
They trimmed it down.
Aliens, but they just cut it out. I mean,
So going along the topic of just unnecessary, why is this even happening? And maybe this is explained better in the version where we know that they're aliens and what's going on there. But for the version I watched is Michael Ironside is from the past, and they're kind of watching what this guy's doing with his thing. He's aging now because that's what you do when you're the last immortal left on Earth. And they decide, you know what? even though he's aging and going to die, we should go and kill him. And by doing that, they actually trigger the entire movie happening. If they just sat back in their lazy boys, right? Like, I'm immortal. I'm fine. I'm just going to hang out here for another 20 years. You're aging pretty quick.
So that is a plot hole, because in the Alien version, original, I guess, if you win the game, or whatever they call it, the gathering, you can choose to go back to Planet Zeist and have your name cleared of all horrendous things you were, accused of. Or you can choose to live your life as a mortal on Earth. And that's what he chose.
But they also positioned it that he forgot. That he forgot where he came from, right? And like Ramirez is like, remember me or whatever. And there's, again, so many just weird plot holes. This one was a disaster, and I understand why most of the other movies and series ignore it. It was such a hot, steaming mess that they're just like, yeah, let's just kind of let's pretend that one didn't happen.
Yeah.
I loved, even like from the very beginning of this one, again, we start off with him having tickets to an event that he clearly doesn't want to be there for. And I'm just like, is this just his go-to? He just goes to things he hates. I don't understand this character. And we start off with the opera singer, who I swear to God is lip syncing. And I'm just like, oh, cool. So we didn't hire actors for this one either. Cool. That's all right. And it just like starts the entire movie off on this tone where I'm just like, oh, this is going to be a ride.
To be fair, in most movies and TV, they lip sync because they need better audio quality for recordings.
Fair, but it doesn't usually punch you in the face.
Yeah. Whether it's a good lip sync or bad one is, very, very much makes or breaks it. So, yeah.
So, can you guys explain to me how they brought Ramirez back?
Just say his name and he'll come back. That's
it's in the movie, right? It's in the.
They do mention that, like Sean Connery does say at one point, like just say my name and I'll be there. I'll come for you, no matter when, no matter where.
Right. So like in the past,
enough.
They still have the quickening ceremony, right? Like he and Connor and Ramirez have like a weird glowy gunk, and they call it the quickening. And that connects them.
Oh, they're like holding the sword handle or whatever. Yeah. He's like touching. I remember in the beginning. Okay,
so in the beginning, that's what connects them. And then he says, "Say my name, and I will appear."
That's very possible. I don't remember that whatsoever. I thought the quickening was like after you kill somebody, that like surge of power you get. That was
changed that.
Okay.
Yeah, this is another adjustment to the rules here. Also, as the big fan is going to chop their heads down, the most elaborate way to trap and kill someone, I haven't seen something like this in a long time. They lure them into this like maze of a prison cell, and they get into this room where the doors slam shut. Keep in mind, the doors lock shut, and this fan starts coming down to chop them into bits. And Ramirez holds it up, like not touching it, like using the force, and just holds it up. And he's like, go. And then the doors just open and they go. And then he disappears into a sparkle of mist.
Yeah, it was awesome.
I don't get it.
He came back as a spirit and he used up all of his ghostliness, and then he was evaporated.
Well, I don't think...
Honestly, that's actually the best description I've ever heard so far, man. Thank you.
I mean,
I have to say, like, as much as like, sorry, go ahead.
You have to use a spinning fan room. Otherwise, how are you going to kill that immortal, right? So that's why the fan was there.
Yeah.
But like the people who built this place didn't know about immortals.
It's just a happy.
And why do the doors just open up all of a sudden? Why is there a fan that lowers? Who builds a room like
It's
that?
something to do with
Future
Okay,
corporations. Have you
This
not
is-
seen any
it's
James
something-
Bond movies?
Here's another.
That's how you kill
Sean
James Bond.
Connery
He's
movie.
James
The
Bond, and
Rock.
that's how you kill
When
him.
they're escaping Alcatraz in The Rock, and there's like
Yeah,
flames
underneath
shooting
the
out of
ground.
the ground for no reason at all, and they got to roll
Mhm.
through them. Why are these rooms in existence?
because it's awesome.
They take me away from a movie. In any other than maybe an Indiana Jones movie, they take me out of the
Right.
film.
That's fair. With
Fair.
Indiana Jones, it makes sense because there are traps known to happen.
It's a temple. It's
Yeah,
full of booby
yeah.
traps, right? I
Not a
get it.
prison
You know, maybe the
underground.
Maze Runner or
Yeah.
something. I don't know, but not this.
Yeah.
Not a power station in like the Himalayas or wherever the heck they were.
I have to say, as much as it didn't make any sense bringing Sean Connery back, and I don't know how they tricked him to do 2 of these movies, he was easily my favorite part of this movie.
Yeah.
Like, as much as I questioned him in the first movie, he was just a joy in this one. Like, every scene with him, well, the first couple scenes with him in it, where he's like figuring out where he's in. I mean, like not Highlanders, Immortals can get caught up with the time they're in very quickly, because he comes from like the 1700s or something to the 2100s, and is just like, cool, planes, I get this.
I've got a
Like,
passport.
everything
No
he
problem.
did, he was just like, fine. Right?
Yeah,
Like,
no.
don't mind me, I'm just going to
Here's
get on
this
this
pearl
plane.
earring. I've got a wardrobe and a limousine and
so
a
good. It was
passport.
so
This-
good.
Hey,
I am certain that
the
pearl earring would
emergency
cost a lot of
flight
money.
video was amazing. He's watching the emergency flight video on the plane, and it's just showing like the worst things that can happen on the plane. That was hilarious to me, and his charm with his female companion in the seat. I was like, oh yeah, that's classic Connery. Yeah, again, I enjoyed Ramirez. I just hated what they did with his character again. It was
I don't
travesty.
disagree with that, but he was just the most entertaining part of this movie. Like, I was actually
Yeah.
laughing for a couple of scenes. Like, that was just a good time. The passport aside, and the fact that not the fact that the pearl was worth a lot of money, I can understand that. It was the fact that the guy at the shop knew how much it was worth. Like, he just looked and was like, oh,
Yeah.
you can clearly buy a suit and a limo with this. Like,
Yeah, that's. I have no idea. Like, that could have been like a Cracker Jack toy. I don't know. But yeah, so that was.
Now,
yeah.
I think, Dan, you were questioning. What were you questioning? You were questioning something.
oh, so many things.
I
have a
know.
list.
Now I can't pick what I was going to say about it. The reason.
How he gets on a
The
plane.
reason why is Sean Connery in this movie. Period.
Oh, like the actor,
Yes.
not the plot line?
Actually, I
Okay,
believe
go for it.
I read a few things, but one of the reasons this movie got made is that Christopher Lambert and Sean Connery enjoyed working together so much that they wanted to do it again.
Really? Okay.
And it also explains why Ramirez would want to befriend him in the first movie. If they were time travelers or aliens from a distant
yes.
planet and they went
Yes.
together, they would, depending on the version you watch, they would want, like, he would want to help out his
Exactly
buddy. And it
right.
would kind of explain the first movie. Although he doesn't clue him in the first movie about them being aliens or time travelers or
Weird.
whatever, obviously. So, yeah, another glaring hole. I don't want to spend too much time on this one. This was not a great film for me. It frustrated me. And I don't have, I think I've covered everything I want to say about it. You guys have anything more you want to go into number 2?
Oh my! I do have to touch on the train scene for a second. As much as the
that's right.
the
train.
airplane
Thank you.
video got your fancy, the train scene just absolutely did it for me. And what on earth is happening right now? There is a scene for
Right.
anybody who's not seen it where like the villain gets onto a train, a public transit subway, I guess, and it's just like, let's see how fast this thing can go. And apparently, it can go light speed.
647 miles per hour, which apparently is 10 G's of acceleration because they were flying to the back of the train. Did you catch it, guys?
Yeah,
Did you see
it's
the
literally
guy?
ripping skin off
Oh,
of
yeah.
people.
Yes.
The mocks are so high, and
There
he's just
were
laughing, having a great
babies
time.
on that train. That was vicious. There were babies
This
on
guy
that train.
means business, man.
Well, in
the
most
trains
of the
mean
movies,
business.
1, 2, 3. I can't remember if they do it in 4, but there's a scene where they scare somebody. They get in a car, they take a hostage or hostages, and they drive really fast because they can't die and they want to scare the crap out of somebody. And they do it in all of the movies. There was a car scene with the Kruger. There's the train scene in number 2. Then in The Sorcerer, they take the kid for a car ride on the tarmac with magical planes or something. Like, they always do this scene in every movie. And this one was dumb. I agree, Dan. It was terrible.
It was terrible, but I was pretty entertained for that, like, 45 seconds or whatever it was. Where I'm just like, what is happening?
How did they film that? Did they film it like they turned the car on its end and just let people fall to the back to show that massive acceleration?
Yeah, probably.
Which me as a lover of science and physics, that offended me. I was like, come on. It's not 10 Gs of acceleration, and it's not going 647 miles per hour like this. No. And then he drives it through a wall, and it just kind of like pops out the other side like a cartoon. Boop. Yeah, and you're like, what?
No, yeah. The entire thing was just like mind-boggling. I'm like, I don't understand how any of this works. But other than that, I'm pretty okay to move on.
Yeah, that's fair. I'm good to rate this bad boy.
Well, you went last. You
want
to
go
first?
Sure. I can go first. I'll probably still have the highest score. This one fell a little short compared to the first one because, 1, the original idea is kind of played, and 2, there's aliens if you watched that one, and not if you didn't. And it really bothered me watching, because I watched Renegade first. I didn't watch the theatrical first because everybody said Renegade's the superior and somewhat fit continuity. But there's like times in the movie when they're talking about things from the theatrical release that are left in and you just can't get out of because you're trying to work with fully edited movie, right? And so that really bothered me in this movie because it was so lopsided of like, what is happening? The edits, the scene to scene didn't make sense. After Connor just like beds that woman immediately, the morning after they're talking about how he's an alien. That's what they're talking about. It's not even close to, oh, this is what immortals are. It's like, no, I'm here because I'm an alien. That's what they say without saying the word alien. So it's like really rough. And they just left that in. But I have to come back to it. Super fast trains killing people and over the top like silliness jumps into this is hilariously bad. So there was
the bird twins,
the bird twins, and that's again like
the Green Goblin twins,
futuristic and like alien. It's like, what? It only works that they're aliens, not that they're these crazy Highlanders with technology that's way beyond what is in the world. It's so funny to me. But Queen still there, so I love it. Sean Connery was like the best part of this movie. His little montage of getting his suit on and just living his best life, just happy to be alive for some unknown reason, and just knowing exactly where Connor is and how to get there, afraid of on the plane, how he ever got on it, who knows. Like, so funny in all the wrong reasons, but that like brings me into the movie where it does the exact opposite for Brian, it feels like. So overall, with all that said, 25, that's the score. It was bad.
So that went down 10 points.
10 points from the other movie, yeah.
Okay.
Brian doesn't even have 10 points to go down.
For me, the cinematography was about the same, maybe the slightest of upticks here, but it felt like it was the same. Too close a shot. I couldn't see the fight sequences, which I probably didn't want to see because what I could see, and they were terrible. It was the exact same for the scoring of the audio and the sound effects and everything. It wasn't amazing. I liked the music. I didn't like the way it was used. It felt very loud. Just like the train scene, they just jacked up this rock music to blow you away. Once again, acting and dialogue was atrocious. Absolutely atrocious. The plot on this one, though they attempted to be more intricate and explain things from the previous movie, failed epically. It was a total disaster, to the point where they had to chop it up and spit it back out, and that made it even worse. So the plot just went way down for me. Enjoyment was about the same as the first one. I didn't very much enjoy this. I kind of just kept watching it because I wanted to see some of the bits that I had seen as a kid. Like, I'd seen pieces of it. I just wanted to put the whole thing together, primarily. Wouldn't have otherwise sat through this movie. I regret having to have paid money to rent the film. This one came out at a total of 18 points out of 100 for me.
Ouch. All right. So for me, I'm just going to start off by saying Will was not wrong. It was sci-fi. It did hit me a little bit better. So we're just going to start there. The music in this one was... I kind of like that they did bring back some of the tracks from the original one. It was pretty forgettable overall, but it didn't have that like loud rock music that took me out quite as much as the first one did. So I did give this a bit of a higher score. Not much, only a 55. Cinematography, all the sci-fi elements were very, very basic, and a lot of this movie was very blue, but it was serviceable. Like, it was okay for what it was. Like, it kind of got the point across for what they're trying to do, considering this is, 91? Yeah. Now, obviously, you can look at other bigger budget movies in 91 or like around that time. Like, you get like Total Recall and Terminator 2 and stuff like that. But you're like, the budgets are nowhere close. So comparing those two is a little bit harsh. So I thought the cinematography was again serviceable at 45. The acting was atrocious. I loved Sean Connery in this movie way more than I liked him in the first movie. But he's really the only thing carrying this movie. The dialogue is, oh my God, so rough. There's a scene that I literally wrote it down. Say goodbye, Highlander. Why? Are you going somewhere? And I just, like, I could have seen my own brain how hard I rolled my eyes. Like, it was just so incredible.
I love it.
So, yeah, of course you do. I gave that, like, 25, and, like, 24 of those points are Sean Connery and his scene where his, like, the montage of him getting his suit and all that stuff was legitimately fun for me. The plot on this one, they took the initial super basic concept, which I really liked in the first one, and overcomplicated the crap out of it for absolutely no reason. It doesn't add anything positive to this experience. They're just making it so incredibly ridiculous. And the fact that the entire movie could have been avoided if the villain had
Waited
just, like, not done anything.
Not done anything.
Then, like, the entire movie just doesn't happen. Because, like, as you mentioned, he forgot that he was he wanted to say Highlander. He forgot that he was an immortal. He wasn't chasing it. He was just living his best life at the opera and having sex with people much younger than him. Like, just leave it alone and let him just die. And then you're like, cool, we won. Ta-da! But they just had to push that entertainment. Entertainment-wise, I don't know. Maybe it's just because this one was, like, maybe this one did hit that mark for me that you had in the first one, where it was so bad that I did enjoy it. But I found myself actually entertained by this one. Like, not highly entertained by any stretch, but more so than the first one. I wasn't falling asleep during this one. So I gave it a 25. So this is not a good score
movie
overall.
No.
4. But it's higher than either of you.
Wow.
And, like, of the franchise, this is the one where I'm kind of like, there are actually scenes I enjoy.
Wow.
Not a good movie by any stretch of the imagination, but higher than the two of you.
Sorry, what was the final score?
34.
34. That's a banger.
Yeah, banger. That's a banger for sure.
So that gives our total score 26 for Renegade: The Quickening.
Yes.
Okay.
All right. Moving on to Highlander number 3, which also has multiple titles. Now, do you know why this one is named multiple things? This is either The Sorcerer or The Final Dimension, depending on where you're watching.
Yeah, so again, it was theatrical cut versus DVD release. And I feel that it was just for rating of the movie. Not theatrical to DVD, but theatrical in Europe compared to theatrical in US. That's the difference. They cut out a couple.
The title rated higher.
Yeah, they just made it slight changes to change the rating and thought that it would play better in America. But not like an overarching, this is horrible, we need to try to fix it.
I mean, there wasn't but like 12 minutes of different footage in the two versions, right? It was mostly they changed the poster and the name was the big thing,
I think
right?
the sex scene was different as well, and there was something else I can't remember, but not a lot changed. Not a notable amount. Not like Highlander 2 when at the end of the movie they float off into space together to go to Planet's Ice.
Yeah.
That's not in the Renegade cut for some reason.
Now, a quick note. In between Highlander 2, The Quickening, and Highlander 3, The Sorcerer / The Final Dimension, is when Highlander the series started, and that had Duncan MacLeod as the lead role in that series. That's when the first season started, and I did check out some like cliff notes of this, and I have to agree with Cleaning Agent. The first season was rough, but they did get to some better character development in later seasons and actually had like multi-dimensional characters. Though I wouldn't ever watch the show, for the time and the theme, it was acceptable. But we don't have to go into the series. That's just to give you guys some chronological. It came in between those two films.
Now, I do have a question for chat / you guys, if you know, because I know the show, I'm assuming, focuses on Duncan, not on Connor.
Yes.
Does Connor have a son in the TV show? Because he made no sense in this movie.
Oh, okay. So he does not mention his son in this, but it's I think because the series is before this movie. So
yes. And Raven is saying no.
Yeah. So in the movie, I watched the first episode, which is the only episode Connor MacLeod is in. And in it, we find out that Adrian Paul, who is Duncan MacLeod, is like 50 years younger than Connor, but from the Connor, household.
From the
clan MacLeod. And so similar vibe. He's like the Sean Connery to Duncan, that he finds him and is like, hey, this is what immortals are. Welcome to the club. And so you get a little bit of that back and forth of time, past to present in the first episode, but it's more just kind of introducing who Adrian Paul is. But again, the first season is a little wishy-washy. It was like
the whole series, the whole movie franchise is wishy-washy.
They were like trying to sell this to multiple countries in multiple ways. Like I think in Japan or something, it was supposed to be like a rock and roll superheroes show. In Europe, it was something else. In America, it was something else. It was all very different. And so they had trouble juggling that. And it kind of became like a Monster of the Week kind of TV show where every week they faced a new immortal and won the day somehow. But then after that, like Brian said, they kind of got more into developing characters and questioning what immortals wanted out of this game and how it kind of worked and further that.
They started judging morality too. Like they started showcasing why people are doing things and giving the viewers like, hey, there's not bad guys and good guys. There's people who are trying to accomplish what they feel is their goal.
They do talk about good and bad a little bit and kind of warrant the whole reason why Sean Connery took Connor MacLeod under his wing in the first movie is that when you quicken, when you take the life of immortal, depending on that immortal's outtake, you take in that trait. So if they're kind of like a vengeful immortal trying to rule the world in a diabolical way, if you take enough of those heads, you will start thinking that way and becoming diabolical. And so it's like a balance of like, which is kind of weird to me because then like, do you have to off good Highlanders along the way too? Just to keep your neutrality up. It's kind of funny, but they question that and you're like,
hey, Paul, I need to balance the scales, buddy. I'm going to kill you. I'm sorry, buddy. I'm feeling really bad today, and I need some of your goodness.
It's fine. I'll say your name. You'll come right back.
No, that's erased. That's erased. So anyway, Connor is just in the first episode to like introduce Adrian Paul's character, and then we follow him from then on out. Yeah.
Okay. Does it play any impact in the third movie whatsoever? I know it does in the fourth movie.
It's just chronological order. Duncan doesn't make an appearance in number 3.
Well, no, I knew that, but I wasn't sure if anything else.
I mean, maybe
because like the fourth movie has a lot of stuff. I'm assuming from the TV show.
They pitch number 3 as a prequel to number 2. To like
erase number 2,
kind of rewrite some things and erase it a little bit. They don't necessarily say that, but it kind of like don't they say like takes place 10 years later? Or maybe I'm thinking number 4. I can't. They're starting to blend together here.
I want to say the third one takes place like they show stuff from 10 years ago. Oh no, sorry, the fourth one shows stuff from 10 years ago and then goes back to present day.
Right.
which made no sense to me because that is showing stuff before 3 that clearly happened after 3, and you're just like, the whole timeline is messy.
Pretty loosey-goosey.
So number 3, the Kane, the enemy, the bad guy Kane, is captured inside a cave after taking the head of the good sorcerer, who was kind of like a Ramirez character to McLeod, who was teaching him some skills and how to be a good dude. And he says, McLeod, get out of here, I'll fight this guy. He fights the guy knowing he's going to lose, but he tricks him, and the cave collapses and entombs him and 2 other immortal dudes, like lesser immortal guys, with him for 400 years. Then McLeod goes and does his thing from the Highlander 1 and thinks that he's the last immortal, and that's when Kane emerges, and he's not the last immortal, and now he's got to fight some more.
3 or 4.
That's kind of how... Do I kind of got that right?
Yes.
So if he's not the last immortal, how did he get the prize in the second one?
Exactly. There's still plot holes because, again, this should be a TV series, never a franchise of movies. But that's okay.
Absolutely.
Okay. I think that's pretty much it. You forgot to mention... So the sorcerer guy in wherever they were, he's the one that gave Ramirez his sword. That's where they got the katanas from. That's who Ramirez was trained by. And he also was a sorcerer and able to conjure images and different things. So when Kane beheaded him, he absorbs those powers and is able to do all kinds of magic funness for fun.
So, I mean, really, the sorcerer should have been like, McLeod, take my head quick, and then
Exactly.
run. Like, that's what he should have
Balance
done.
it.
Yeah.
Yeah, balance it.
That's a fair point, actually.
So Kane does use his sorcerer powers when he kidnaps McLeod's illegitimate son. Not illegitimate. It's not his biological
son.
His adopted son. There we go. Adopted son. And he uses his magical powers in that stupid chase scene where he's going to scare the crap out of the kid, and he makes it look like a plane's going to hit him as they're running down the tarmac. In the same scary scene that we saw in the first.
Also, is it in this movie that we learn that immortals cannot have children?
They cannot have children.
No, it's in the first movie.
It's in the first movie.
Him and his wife talk about it, right?
Wed.
Okay.
Yeah. You're right. But they really double down on it in this one because he has a son, but it's not his, and
that's why he adopts it. They kind of play up on that a little bit. Obviously, he's missing that in his life.
Much building of the relationship with his son at all. Like, his son was just a character that they needed
propel the plot,
progress the story in that way.
They didn't. They absolutely didn't.
They didn't need his son in it.
That was one of my main points. Is like the son does nothing to the movie. They introduce the fact that he's there. He disappears for most of the movie. He shows up just long enough to get captured. But by the time he gets captured, he's already got a girlfriend. You could have captured her, and then he gets rescued at the end and disappears again. And you never hear about him. That's why I was wondering, like,
car as they ride off into the sunset. It was so pointless.
Yeah. That's why I was wondering if he was in the TV show. So they kind of like, oh well, we have to put him in here because otherwise people will be confused. No, you did the opposite. You put him in there. And
this one doesn't really touch on the TV show. No,
this one doesn't really. Okay. I think it might touch on like some of the rules they implement in the TV show, but very loosely and discardably. I think the real only reason that the adopted child is in here is that it's a way for, and this is pretty weak, it's a way to explore like how an immortal who cannot have children, cannot experience being a parent, this great joy. That's how he's finding his happiness right now.
If you're immortal, would you ever adopt a kid knowing you're going to have to sit there and watch him get old and die?
No.
That's the thing. I think that's what they are. That's what they're trying to, bring up. And that's the whole song. Who wants to live forever? It's like, it's a blessing and a curse. And so it's like, so that's why they're like, don't get married. It's not going to turn out well. As a human, as a person, as a mortal, you want to experience these things. And if you're watching people do this over 400 years, wouldn't you want to experience it too? Wouldn't you want to have a wife and live a life with somebody? Wouldn't you want to raise a child, to put somebody out in the world that you made to help make the world better? So it's like, I think that's the idea behind it. Is it implemented well? No. bleep that. So like, and so maybe it's just me trying to pull more than what is actually there out of these movies, but that's how I justified it, I guess. Did they? No, it didn't work at all. Was he unnecessary? Absolutely. But I think they want to try to explore those things, but obviously don't know how to write to actually do it.
Well, and let's not forget, this isn't the first kid he adopted. He adopted the little girl from World War II when he was fighting Nazis, which would have made a way cooler Highlander movie, right? Highlander fights some Nazis or something.
But that's only in the fourth one, right?
She's in a couple of movies because they kill her off in the fourth one. Rachel, yes. I believe.
That becomes Rachel. She dies in the fourth one, and then you kind of get her backstory, right? I forgot.
I don't know if it's introduced.
She's the secretary or whatever.
I'm not sure.
I think
you get introduced to Rachel in the
right, but you don't know who she is until later. Yeah, until the fourth.
Yeah,
she's just a secretary.
Yeah, and so it's not the first kid that he's adopted.
Right, but it's the first instance of us knowing it, which is a little bit different.
Yeah.
Okay. So, how do you want to talk about this winner?
For me, the number 3 was kind of just a sad repeat of number 1 without Sean Connery.
I think, let's see what I wrote.
This is easily the most forgettable for me. I'm not going to lie. I was trying hard to remember what this was when I was rating, and I'm like, I don't remember most of the set pieces. I don't remember most of the story. I don't remember most of the music. Like, most of this is just like...
It felt like they were trying to recover from number 2 by stepping back to the original formula. And they stepped too hard into the original formula, and it just didn't really go anywhere or do anything. All the cast members were very forgettable. I didn't like the Kane character. He was just creepy and weird. I
think they also changed.
You didn't like his armor with the nipple rings?
Also changed the
or his real nipple rings.
The prostitution scene. They changed that as well between the Europe and the U.S.
Okay, the prostitution that was terrible. Also, and that was one thing. Every single time they were indoors talking about something, I was looking at the set going, this is a Cinemax porn set that they're on, right? Like, you're just looking around and you see like the muted colors and the dark lighting and everything. And nothing looked real. It all looked like a very, very fake set. And it was very disturbing. There was a lot more sex scenes in this one that, in my opinion, were just unnecessary. That was an 80s thing. They didn't need to do that in this one. None of it didn't add to the film at all. This one got worse for me. Other than they tried to get back to the original recipe and they just kind of overcooked it.
Yeah. The movie, one of the things I noticed was very blue. Pretty much everywhere they went, it was blue. And like in the second one, you kind of get away with that because they got the shield so they can't see sunlight. But in this one, like, he's walking inside, it's blue, outside, it's blue. Like, everything has this like weird tinge to it. And even to the point where he's walking around his apartment, once he goes back to his antique shop or whatever, everything is blue. Every light is off. He's doing everything he can in the darkness, to the point where I'm like, okay, maybe like the power isn't working because he wasn't there for so long. But then he goes and turns on a light and you're like, oh, color. Okay, no. This works perfectly. He's just doing everything he can in the dark for reasons past understanding. He's having full conversations with this woman in the dark. And I think, is this the movie where he's like trying to describe to her what immortals are and she's sounding super confused and like they don't actually explain it very well. You kind of get this little second where she's like, wait, so you're immortal, except you do this, but then you can do that, and then you're not. And I'm just like, I'm at least as confused as you are.
Yeah, they almost made a joke. Then Connor says something like that. Yeah. So they even pointed out how kind of
nonsensical it is.
Undefined this whole thing is, which was kind of like, okay, is that supposed to be a joke, or I'm not sure.
I think my head might have still been reeling from the trampoline and trapeze fight that they had with the horrible cinematography where the camera's panning in on like their feet hitting the trampoline and their arms swinging on the trapeze. And then every time they'd swing by, they would just clang swords. They weren't going for each other or anything. They were just clanging swords.
Thunderdome doesn't seem so bad anymore, does it?
It absolutely reminded me of Thunderdome.
This, yeah.
Oh my God. As soon as I saw that scene, I was like, oh wow, how do we get two of these franchises in a row? What are the odds? So one of the things I had with that scene, other than just how incredibly bad it was, although now that you're saying that he had barely any eyesight, if he was actually didn't have a stage man, that would have been a hard scene to fight, or a hard scene to film. So a little bit of props there, but they probably just would have used a different actor in that scene because it's all dark anyways. In that scene, sorry, you're saying Kang is the bad guy's name?
Kane. K-A-N-E.
Breaks Connor's sword, sees something, and then runs away. What did he see, or what did he do?
Break? They're on holy ground, right? They're on holy ground.
Okay.
But Connor was making a defensive maneuver, and Kane was attacking him. If it had anything to do with holy ground, Kane's sword should have broken. Connor's sword was the sword that was folded over 1,000 times by a Japanese sorcerer from a bajillion years ago and was mystically imbued or whatever. And he just shatters it.
Yeah.
And I was like, why did his sword break? Oh, because they need a reason to travel around and make a new sword. That's all.
Yeah, okay.
And then the female finds that little brick and travels halfway across the world on a hunch that he might need it for some reason. She just like brings him this block, like, I found this, and he's like, oh, perfect, that's exactly what I need. Thank you so much. It's like,
she wanted the D
what is
real
going on?
bad, man.
Right?
It's immortal. It's immortal.
Expensive D.
And it
That
was
three of
probably
the three
the
women
sex
love
scene
immortals.
of the whole series was that one there. They really went for it on that one. Christopher Lambert still wearing a shirt the whole time, running around in sweatpants and this heavy long sleeve shirt like the whole movie. Doesn't even take his clothes off to get with his chick, but fine with me. She was gorgeous.
When you can tell a woman that you're immortal and she believes it, you can wear sweatpants all day long. You're still going to be just fine. Three of the three women like immortal men. If this franchise has told me anything.
Yeah.
Oh,
man, if I'd have known that line in my 20s.
Right.
I'm a Highlander. All right, let's go.
Somebody do research on this. I think we're all married men here, but somebody out there do research for us. See if that works.
Please.
Go to a bar, just tell somebody, like, whisper, like, I'm immortal. I can't die.
Oh my goodness.
Oh my goodness.
Okay.
Okay, so at one point we've got him in Paris, I believe it is. And we run into another Highlander who's choosing to die, somehow tricks the guards into killing him instead of Conor McGregor. The guards leave the gates wide open, because of course you do. And they behead this other Highlander to no fanfare whatsoever. Like, no lightning, no nothing. I was expecting them to be like, what's going on?
This is what killed my proximity idea. I was wondering if you could like cut like an immortal's head off and then just like push the guy out of the way and take his place, and you get the quickening sauce or whatever it is, right?
Sauce.
But they chop this dude's head off and nothing happens. And I was like, okay, so it's got to be an immortal that does the deed to get the juice.
I think they explained that at some point, but I don't know when and where. They're all muddled.
I might have been walking to the refrigerator, completely ignoring the scene.
And the other thing is,
I had a hard time with these.
Highlanders can only battle 1 versus 1. One issues a challenge, and they are the only 2 that can battle. That's one of the rules, but it wasn't talked about really that much. Because they're all groupies now, it seems. I don't know. It's weird.
Well, and again, we got another one of these scenes where like the immortals are helping the immortals, and even the bad guy immortals are helping the bad guy immortals, which I'm okay with. But like they got trapped in that ice bridge or the ice area for what, like 400-ish years, 300 years, and the first thing they do when they get free is he kills his friends.
Get some power, get some quickening juice in him.
Just some quick, but it's just like, why did you wait this long? I don't understand. Okay. Just some weird decisions going on.
He's addicted to the sauce, and it's been 400 years. I think they do go into that again a little bit more in the TV show, that the good and bad, so they kind of stick together and things like that. So that's kind of explainable, maybe, but not really.
And in numbers 4, or in number 4, it's a straight up numbers game. They explain that it's all about the numbers.
Hard.
You got to have the numbers.
Oh, we're getting there. Don't you worry. We are getting to that.
All right. Should we rate this bad boy?
I liked. I'm gonna say I did like that the bad guys were helping each other as well. It wasn't just a good guy thing. Like, if your paths are aligned, you will work together. I didn't hate that. I just thought it was weird that like at like not even an opportune moment, he's just like, oh, we're free, slice. Like, okay. Anyways, yes, let's get to rating this one. I think you guys have both gone first, so I guess this is me to go first on this one. All right. Wow. All right. So Highlander 3, the first I mentioned, IMDb gives it a score of 4.5, and I'm going to say that's generous. The music in this one is really hard to rate because I legitimately don't remember it whatsoever. It has none of the returning music that I could think of. Like, it doesn't have
Queen.
that, do you want to live forever or nothing?
They couldn't afford it.
So there's no, it's there. Anyways, there's no negative, but there's no positive. And as I was saying, like, I'm going to try and put music at like a 50 and see where it goes. So like that gets a pretty high score,
Right.
But honestly, it couldn't have been that bad if it doesn't stand out to me one way or the other. Is that the best way to do the rating score? I have no idea. We're still figuring this out. This is only episode 2. For cinematography, this bothered me so goddamn much because this is one of the ones where you're talking about where you get those sweeping shots, but they're way too fast and the camera's really jerky and you're just like, it almost feels like you're in a jet plane that's like doing Top Gun maneuvers as you're just jumping around. And it's just like, this doesn't feel right. This doesn't feel sweeping. It just feels weird. I legitimately hated all of the scenes where they're like, you get the swords clang and then like it changed color as it did it again and again, like almost like it was going to like a negative or something. And it's just like, what is happening and why? The movie is called The Sorcerer, again, in certain locations or for certain reasons. And they really should have leaned away from that because most of that CG looks absolutely atrocious. Like when the sword turns into a snake or something at the very beginning, some of the things that are happening. At one point, he turns around and his glasses are glowing yellow. Like all of it was just unexcusably bad. The one scene, I was watching a trailer for this one just literally to try and remind me what this movie was. And it has a scene where like the little kid turns into Kane. And watching that like 3 times in a row back to back, I was like, it's not great, but it is really creepy. So I'm going to give it a little bit of points for that because it does kind of get the point across. Like, this is messed up, but it's not well done. The acting in this is absolutely atrocious. There's no Sean Connery to save this one. At this point, I have to assume they're purposefully finding bad actors because you would find a decent actor by like law of averages at this point if you've got 3 different movies. So they must be just like, this is where we can save a budget. There's no saving grace in this one as far as the acting goes, unfortunately. And then for plot, razor thin, like non-existent. Like it's not even as fun as the first one. It's not as silly as the second one. It is just a guy gets free and is going after him. Like there's no gathering in this one. The kid is completely just a plot point. He doesn't exist in any way, shape, or form. Like there's no reason for this movie to exist. And then entertainment wise, like I honestly, my note was like non-existent. This was just homework. Like I have no redeeming qualities in this movie whatsoever. I'm giving it a 20.
Wow, that's pretty high.
The music brought it really high up, so I have to change that, I think.
You can make an exception, Dan.
I mean, maybe I should. I don't know.
That's fine. Okay, I'll go next. That's so funny. Yes, so somebody in chat asked, I thought the title was Final Dimension. It's both. It's called The Sorcerer for the European release and Final Dimension for the American release, I believe, is the way it went. Now, okay, I only wrote very little here, and it kind of parallels Run 7, but what he's already said. I tried to find something good about this movie because it's pretty easy to find the bad. I'd say the best part of this movie is when Connor is back in Scotland building his sword. There's like something about him just like working in the fires and banging the metal, and it was like, okay, this is kind of a nice breath of fresh air of Scotland air in this mess of a movie that's just a disaster. At least it was like it was just somewhat peaceful, and you know it was filmed nice enough, and you have the beautiful greenery of Scotland. It was like the only redeeming thing about this movie. The only other thing I wrote was, this seemed like a bad remake of the first film, negating the second film entirely. No Connery, no Queen, I'm out. I give this a 10.
I didn't think that the sword mending scene was that amazing.
I mean, comparatively. I'm saying comparatively.
Yeah. I guess it was so predictable. As soon as his sword broke, I was like, "Oh, okay, this is a quest to fix the sword." And it was kind of lame how he came across the type of metal, and she brought it to him all the way across the world. Like, I don't know. I had no real redeeming qualities. Everything in this movie took a dive, especially the music, because once again, it was just loud rock music, but this time they didn't even have notable bands. It was like anonymous stuff. So that even took a dive for me. And I'm coming through. My overall score is actually an 11. I don't know how I got higher than Cleaning Agent on this, but yeah, just over. This was just terribly boring and painful to get through. The only redeeming quality was that it didn't have such a sloppy attempt at the plot. They tried to just stay true to its roots, even though, like I said, it was a terrible attempt at its true roots. But they kept it simple.
That actually made it worse for me, because, and maybe that's why your score was higher. That actually took me away, because at least in the second movie they tried something new and tried to further.
Yeah.
This was like just a bad remake of the first one, and far inferior. So it just fell so hard for me. So I couldn't get into this. And like the other ones are like serious to like a fault. Like they are taking this serious. I'm scowling throughout the movie, and this one doesn't even do that. You know, it doesn't even do bad good. So I just hated it.
Yeah.
All right, let's
overall.
14. Beautiful. I mean, rightly so.
I don't know if there's going to be another franchise that's going to touch this one. This one might be at the bottom of the list for a very long time. We'll see what we
bring to the table.
Unless we get much harsher.
Should we get into some Endgame action?
Oh, yeah, let's do this.
All right, Highlander Endgame. I don't even know what this is about. Oh, right. This is the coming together of the TV series and the movies in one beautiful spectacle, because the fans would love a little more Connor McLeod. And it's bad. Is that a pretty good recap?
I have to say, for the first couple of minutes of this movie, I legitimately had hope that they actually started taking this seriously. Like, there was a good maybe 15 minutes, maybe that's generous, where I was like, this actually looks decent. Like, the camera work has improved significantly. It looks like it's actually made in the 20th century. Like, everything about this has actually got production quality. You can't really do anything with his acting ability. That's just going to be
the writing.
Duncan, I thought, was a better actor.
Yes, Duncan is, yeah.
The explosion at the very beginning where they kill off the secretary, you're just kind of like, okay, they're kind of starting to go somewhere with this. Maybe this will be a high point for the franchise, or at least like a return to its roots. And then it kind of took a pretty big nosedive after a few minutes. I think maybe like when they introduced the sanctuary, I was like, maybe not. But for the first little bit, this looks like a real movie.
Yeah, I guess so.
Which is such a lame, like, compliment for this franchise.
Sure.
Like, this one actually looks like a real movie. Good job, guys.
They also do bring in a lot more of the TV series elements into this, with like more Watchers and the Sanctuary. These are all things like in the first movie, no human knew about these immortals. Now there's humans that are all about watching and
factions,
and
whole
keeping everything
about it,
separated and making sure that the gathering never finishes, right? The game never ends. And so it's like there's so much more to that, which is whatever.
I had a completely different experience in the introduction. I watched Christopher Lambert and Adrian Paul walking and talking, and when Conor McGregor looks at him and he's like, some people change or whatever, his acting in that scene was so utterly atrocious. I was like, oh God, please guys, don't make me watch this. Like, it was so bad. I was like, I already paid $4.
Very soap opera.
It was so, that opening scene, absolutely just, I was like, this is going to be so absolutely horrible. And you know,
it's just numb to his acting by then. I don't know.
For me, for me, it was really terrible. I was like, who is this Duncan McLeod guy? Because I hadn't done my research. I didn't know about this TV series at this point. I was like, who is this Duncan McLeod guy? And the movie just kept following him. And kept following him. And it never really followed Connor. And I was like, what's going on? I'm not really opposed to it because Connor's acting is so horrible. And then, guys, the saving grace makes his appearance.
Yes, I was gonna say.
Steps onto the scene, and I lost it. I was like, "Oh my god! They're not gonna cut away from a fight scene. They're gonna let them throw punches at each other. There's actual choreography. This is amazing! Oh my god! Absolutely saved this movie for me. Not that this movie succeeded; it was still an epic failure overall." But Donnie Yen carried this film for me.
Yes, and for those of you who don't know, just all I got. Iron Monkey, IP Man, Blade 2, John Wick. Donnie Yen's been in a lot of martial arts movies, things like that.
Rogue One?
Yeah, one of the Star Wars. Yep.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Donnie Yen's been around.
And he came in, and I was like, oh my gosh, one of the biggest flaws for this film is that horrible cinematography to account for Christopher Lambert's inability to swing a sword without hitting himself in the face. And so when they brought
it's a metal condition. It's a metal condition.
Actual martial arts in this, and they had guns, which was like, yeah, it might not permanently kill them, but you can knock them on their ass and then chop their head off with an axe. Yeah. You know, that's what you can do. And they do try, like, that's a tactic they use when, like, Sanctuary people were trying to take out immortals if they had to. And so, like, they started bringing in, like, a realistic approach to what would happen. I liked the Sanctuary idea, this prolonging the inevitable by just putting them under, like, hey, there's an alternative to them just fighting to the end. And we had the introduction of massive amounts of immortals. Instead of like a handful of people fighting their way to the end, there were hundreds and hundreds in this epic game that is going on for a long time with lots of moving parts, and they increased all the things and aspects about the show. Now, was it a drastic change from the original? Hell yeah. But it made more to go on. And maybe that's because they built off of the TV series, but they made more to go on, and there was more for me to get involved in, and I appreciated that. Now let's talk about, did they pull off any of these aspects? Would you guys like to step in here?
So, okay, I'll go back a second, because I also, like, I knew that a TV show existed, but I didn't realize this movie was going to be pulling from that. So they introduce Duncan at the very beginning, and I had no idea what was going on. And for large chunks of this movie, I'm just like, I don't know what's happening. I kind of clued in after a while, like, this is probably tying into the TV show, because they're not explaining anything. It is just like, here you go. Like, you already know what's going on, because this is like the most popular franchise in the world, clearly. And you're just like, what is going on? Okay, no, this is just me. For the people who like the TV show, maybe this is amazing.
No, it's not.
Yeah. But for the people who like are struggling through the movies, not so much. So I did like that they tried to bring the world, make the world bigger. Like, I like the fact there's a lot of immortals. I like the fact that there's like a group watching them, even though they don't really explain what's going on there. At one point, one of the watchers kills another one, and I feel like you're supposed to have like severe reverence for that scene, and I just didn't know what was going on. The fact that they're bringing guns in, I think, is actually really smart, because we've seen in multiple movies you can hurt the immortals, you just can't kill them. So like, if I can use a shotgun and put you down, well, then I can walk up and slice your throat and we're good to go, right? Like, I liked that aspect of it, that they actually were like, oh, let's think about that and actually do something other than just trying to decapitate you from the get-go. Mm-hmm. Again, I'm not saying any of this actually worked all that well, but at least they were trying something that felt like they were taking the original material and building off of it, instead of taking the original material and throwing it out and starting again, or copying and pasting it. Like, this felt like it was actually taking the next logical step, which I did. I liked the swing that they took, even though they didn't really hit the ball.
Right.
The TV actors, again, maybe I was just so numb because I watched these movies in fairly quick succession. Felt like they were doing a better job than like some of the actual actors in the franchise had.
What a jab at television actors. Unbelievable, may I just say.
But you know what I'm saying? Like,
you know, TV is now pulling huge movie star names.
Now it is. It wasn't in 92 to 99.
That doesn't mean they were lesser quality actors, though.
I was making fun of the movie actors when I did that.
Maybe, but not lesser quality.
You were making fun of everybody.
I was making fun, maybe that didn't come across right. I was making fun of the actors in Highlander 1, 2, and 3. I was not making fun of the TV actors, but maybe that didn't come across quite properly. Yeah, I don't know, man. This movie, I like that it tried something. I wish it had landed it. And a part of my brain was just trying to give it that, like, maybe if you watch the TV show, this makes a whole lot of sense. And maybe this is like the epic season finale to the TV show that like a lot of people were looking for. Because the thing that I don't understand about this movie, like we're on the fourth one now. Every single one of these movies flopped hard at the box office. Like the fact that they made a second one is baffling. The fact that they got to 4 and a TV series, I have no idea what's going on.
Five movies.
So. That one just came out straight on DVD. But like this movie lost $12.5 million. The second one lost $14 million. Third one, sorry, lost $14 million. The second one lost $15 million. The first one lost $10 million. Like the studio making this, assuming it's the same studio, is out something like $50 million to make these movies, and yet they're still like, "Yep, let's reboot it." I don't understand. I have no idea where the thought process is on this one.
They definitely sold the rights to a few different places throughout.
Okay.
But that being said, it's a cult classic, which means it was much more popular outside of theatrical release. So I'm guessing there was money made back, and there was enough of an appeal. Again, the second one just happened because Sean Connery liked working with Christopher Lambert, and they were like, "Let's do another one." But somewhere along the way, there has to be somebody's making money, or it's not going to be made at all, right?
Mm-hmm.
I have to assume, like I have to hope, but like the money is not there on paper,
sure.
So I don't know who's doing back alley deals to get these things made. But
okay, I agree with a lot of what you guys are saying. The creative points is there because they are trying to expand this world of what the immortals are and how the game works, and delve into more about the questioning of like, I'm just going to break the rules. I'm going to gang up of immortals so we can always overpower who we want to take out next. Like that was interesting, and the sanctuary is an interesting idea. Did they hit on any of it? I think the action was slightly better in this movie, and again because it wasn't just Connor McLeod. Donnie made a huge impact, and Adrian Paul is much better sword fighter than Lambert or whatever it was.
Than a blind guy?
Exactly, yeah. So
that says a lot.
And so I think those might
praise.
be the only things that maybe were better than, and maybe touch base or even got close to making a gain in this movie over some of the others.
Yeah. So this movie introduces a concept that I was kind of wondering about the whole way along, but I don't think they actually make it make any sense whatsoever. And that is when you kill another Highlander, you gain their power. Like this one explicitly talks about it. There's even a scene where they're like, "Oh, you're a 168 and you're a 142. This guy's a 675." And they're somehow their math works out. They're like, "He's a 675. We're only a 300 put together. You should kill me, and then you'll be a 290 something.
You might have a chance.
640." Yeah. Like, why wouldn't you take 2-on-1
seriously?
Right? Like, I would do 2-on-1 before I try. Like, let's have you fight up that much. Like, it's a huge punch up. But then, either right before or right after that, the bad guy ends up killing his entire crew.
Power up.
So either, let's say he's a 650. Either he becomes a 654 because he killed his 4 friends. But does he gain all of the power of all of them? Like they're each level 100, let's say. Does he go to like 900 or does he go to like 654? They don't really explain how that works. But if all you do is gain 1, then it makes even less sense that the McLeods would kill each other because he's like, I'm a 148 and you're a 162. You should go to a 149, then you'll do it. So if they actually do gain all of the power from their souls, then the bad guy just got exponentially more powerful. So how does it like? Why introduce this concept if it makes no sense whatsoever? And then you bring up the other one quick second because this one baffled me. You also got the concept of like you can bring people back by saying their names. So either A, kill Connor and then bring him back by saying his name. This is the second one's
erased,
but it's part of the franchise.
It's
part of the franchise.
You know it is erased.
Say his name, bring him back, and then you got 2 people fighting for you again. But
kill
also,
again, double the money, right?
Well, that's where I'm going. Like, if you can kill somebody and like gain all their power, if they come back, do they gain their power back, or do they start at 1 again?
Yeah, you can't kill them; they just disappear after utilizing the Force. That's how it works the second time around.
Yeah, that's right. They have 1 Force use before they dissipate. Okay. here's what I noticed. This is the first theatrical story that actually has a female immortal.
Yep.
Lisa B as the wife of Duncan MacLeod, Kate MacLeod, aka Faith.
Yes.
Whose only claim to fame in cinema is that she plays a succubus who tries to kill a guy by having sex with him to death. And then she played in this movie. So you know why they brought her into this film. It wasn't because of her acting skills.
Right. But that's not what I was worried about or concerned with. But I was more concerned with, like, why is it all just men? And I know the answer, because it was the 80s and it's all testosterone city. But I just...
There actually might be a real answer to that one, though.
No.
Because the only way you can become a Highlander, or sorry, the only way you realize you're an immortal is if you die a horrendous death.
A violence.
So if most women are either dying natural causes, like say childbirth or old age, then you wouldn't have that happen.
But we saw throughout the Highlander
maybe?
movies, and burned at the stake happened in this one. There was some pillaging, and there was definitely some violent deaths going on with men, lady, and children. Right.
Sure, but not everybody who dies. Like, you have to be an immortal already.
You'd think there'd be a few, you know? There'd be a handful.
Yeah. Fair. But this is the first movie we see more than two, period. Well, so all the other movies are just like two
I believe there was a handful of female immortals in the television series. I just felt like, talk about underrepresentation, and like that's just like a part of the time. It just stood out to me in the time we're living in now that it took 4 theatrical movies before there was one female Highlander or immortal. And yeah.
Now, the TV series had a couple of female immortals, and one of them became a spinoff, was the Raven, the short blonde-haired girl who was a thief, and she dealt with issues of morality because she was like a bad person, but she tries to become a good person as she... Yeah, good at heart kind of story, which was pretty boring or whatever, and really terrible overall series. But maybe they explored the reasoning for that, in the storyline. I don't know. I didn't sit through that. I doubt it. I mean, realistically, it was because the 80s. It was all machismo there.
Sure.
So,
I honestly don't have too much more to say about this movie.
Yeah, I like that there was a female immortal. I didn't like that she was pretty much just a piece of meat, but at least she was immortal. And I like the story element of, like, Duncan was selfish and made her an immortal without asking, just straight up killed her. And I love that she just was like, no, F you, you a-hole. How dare you do this? Take away my chances of... they're talking about these same very cool, interesting concepts of morality versus immortality, not being able to have children. And I thought that was very cool that they put that into this movie and the way they did it. Was it overall executed well? Not really, obviously, but I like the idea being in the movie.
I like the idea of it. I wish they'd explored it more, but I agree with you on that.
All right, that's about all I have to say about this movie.
All right. Okay. Brian, do you want to start us off?
Yeah, this one, the music was even worse. Took another step down. The cinematography was both better and worse in this, because we finally got some action sequences that I got to enjoy. They stepped back and we got to see that happening, but it was still this kind of jerky footage whenever that wasn't happening. It was like everything else now sucked, and the fight scenes were the only thing that were plausible, like doable. It was kind of weird. So I was like, okay, you flip-flopped on me now. The acting and dialogue was just probably some of the worst. I would say it is the worst in the franchise, except I watched the 5th movie or most of it. So of the 4 movies that you guys watched, this was the worst acting and dialogue. And the plot was, I give them props for trying some new things and trying to grow it, but this is too little too late. They did this in the fourth movie. This is what should have happened in the second movie to try and grow it instead of this weird alien crap that got edited out. You know, they should have done this and grew the whole thing a little bit better. I'm sure they could have found ways to just talk about it instead of what they did. So the plot was both a nice attempt, but really poorly executed and kind of convoluted. And they didn't feel like they knew which way they wanted to go. They just wanted to shore some things up, and they had some ideas from the TV show. And then finally, my enjoyment of it was much better. I might have actually enjoyed this one probably the second most. I don't know. It was right up there with 1 and 2. But it was mostly because I was watching Donnie Yen in the fight scenes. I really like the choreography in those fight scenes. Those were amazing. Those are just really good choreographed fight scenes, and I enjoy that. I think those are challenging to pull off, and those really long ones where it doesn't look like they're throwing punches or anything, those are tough scenes to make, and they had a couple of those in this one, and I really appreciated that. So that brought up my overall score. This one I gave 20 out of 100. So we're back up from the brink of me just turning it off in the middle of the movie. And this is something that was still hated the experience overall. But it did reprieve itself for some attempts in this franchise.
Totally fair. Will, what do you think?
I'm in the similar boat. I enjoyed the action. I felt, as far as action was concerned, this movie stepped up a lot. And these are, as far as I know, action movies, kind of fantasy sci-fi action movies at their heart. So that was good. And I did appreciate the greater detail to the story. They did try something new. It wasn't coming off of the third one, which was just such garbage remake of trying to get the magic of the first one and failing. This felt better. So I actually bang on same score, 20.
Okay. All right, here we are.
Hey, at least we're coming to an end, okay?
No, for sure. I did not anticipate that I'd be the high mark on these franchises, but here we are. Okay, so as far as the music goes, I really have no notes. It was like the third one, like it's completely non-memorable whatsoever. There's got none of the returning music. It's just bland. Maybe I need to really rework how I score the music in these things, because this is giving it way too high of a score. The cinematography in this one, I agree with Brian. It really did step up. It's not great, but it definitely is. They're trying and succeeding a little bit more in showing the fight scenes. I hated that they kept speeding them up. I wish they just left them alone. I don't think that added to them in any way. It didn't make them feel more impactful. It just kind of takes you out of it a second ago, or it takes you out of it a little bit. But overall, I think that they were an improvement. The actual, like, you see a bit more of history in this one as you kind of see Connor and Duncan's journeys, and I feel like they did a good job in those regards. Like, the history looked better. Not only the set pieces there, but like the costumes there and stuff like that. Like, it looks like they spent a little bit of money on that to make that feel, I'm going to say more accurate, but at least not as standoutishly bad. The acting in this, I think, was a mild improvement. It's not good, and obviously Christopher Lambert, we've said what we're going to say about him. I didn't mind Duncan as much. I thought he was okay, and if the franchise had decided to go with him forward, or maybe with the TV show, that might have been less painful. So I gave that a little bit of a boost. It's not as good as Sean Connery, but it's definitely better than number 3. The plot to this one, I gave a fairly low score, despite the fact that I liked a lot of things they were trying to do, because I feel like while I loved the swings they were taking, so many of them didn't connect or needed explaining because I didn't watch the TV show, and they really took for granted that I was going to watch the TV show before I saw this movie. So maybe that's on me, but as a person who loves movies and doesn't have time to watch 9 seasons of, I'm assuming, an hour-long TV show, there's so much in this movie they did not explain or even attempt to explain. They're just like, here's a concept. And you're like, oh, all right, sure. The watchers were just, I had no idea what was going on. Like, you can kind of put together that it's part of the TV show, but from a movie perspective, they just showed up and you're like, all right, this is happening, I guess. Entertainment wise, I feel like while I was watching it, I wanted it to end so badly, but looking back at it, I feel like this might have been one of the higher entertainment values of the franchise. Again, low bar, but there might have been, I feel like they were close to having something there on this one. Kind of like the first one. The actual idea of it is, it's got potential. I just don't feel like it was well executed. If they are doing a remake with Henry Cavill and they want to go this route, but explain what some of these things are, I wouldn't necessarily be opposed to that. I like the world they introduced in this one more so than the world they introduced in any of the ones previous to this. That being said, this still does get a pretty paltry 31, which is higher than you guys gave it, but still a very big fail.
Right. I would say if someone is looking to watch a movie that has this idea of battling for power to become supreme, to become the one, I would check out Jet Li's The One. I thought that movie had a great idea that was kind of based in the Highlander ideals, and it was much better executed, much better quality all around. Is something you should go for. Would you guys like me to cover number 5?
Why don't we get Dan's score for this movie? Then you cover 5.
Oh, I thought I did.
Oh, did you give us the overall score though?
31.
Oh, for all 3 of us.
Oh, I apologize.
Oh,
yes.
yeah.
Okay. 24 is the overall score.
So if you want to give us the full average after Brian gives us a rundown of number 5, that would be awesome.
Sure.
Okay, so for number 5, it continues with the story of Duncan. Christopher Lambert makes no appearance whatsoever.
Because he's dead and absorbed.
And that's right. The thing is, this one takes the only thing that this franchise, one of the few things that this franchise is known for, which is the slogan, "There can be only one," and it takes an absolute hot steaming dump on that. And instead of them vying to be the last remaining immortal, it has to do with this mystical power that can only be contained by one person. And that's it. So it's not about being the last remaining eternal anymore. And they bring in this guardian character villain who's kind of like Zoom from The Flash. He's like really fast and he's a bad guy and he's got 2 swords and he, runs around and beats people up at high speeds. And he's got like albino skin and a weird helmet. I don't know. He's kind of a cross between Zoom and something from Dune. So it's really a weird character that they didn't develop or explain very well. Duncan gets a team of people and goes out to try and find this one power source. That's why they call it the Source. That's the name. It's Highlander 5, the Source. And they're trying to go find this source. And for me, this movie was so bad. When I get to a movie that gets down under a 10, I turn it off. I can't do that. I'm not going to sit. I don't care how good it is, how bad it is, how great the franchise is, its source material, actors, redeeming plots, or anybody that recommends, you got to see this one scene. I don't care. If it hits a certain point, I turn it off. This movie, I did. I turned off the movie and I just went and I watched some like videos covering clips of it. So I kind of got the gist of it. And it was just really, really atrocious. This was a straight to DVD film. There were no redeeming qualities about it. Cinematography had a mixture of close-up scenes because they're doing bad sword fights and a few elements of martial arts, but Donnie Yen's not in it. They don't really have anybody good other than Adrian Paul, and this was not his best attempt. It was mostly him wandering around looking confused for much of the movie. The sound was atrocious. There was no good songs in it. They kind of didn't have much of they didn't even really follow the rock theme at all in this one. Acting and dialogue was horrible, just appalling. The plot, they completely changed everything about this. They took everything about the Highlander franchise and just said, no, we're going to just erase all that and go a completely different direction with it. And it's going to be all about questing for this source energy thing and this guardian guy who's protecting it and kind of hunting down immortals to make sure that they can't ever get to it. And at the end, Duncan ends up burying him in the ground up to his neck. Like, you didn't even beat him in a sword fight, dude. Like, you ran around and buried him in the dirt. It was so dumb. Zero entertainment or enjoyment factor. I turned it. It was horrible. This movie got a 6 out of 100, and that's why I didn't even finish it. It was really terrible. I see why it just went straight to DVD. So you guys are lucky that you didn't
dodged a bullet.
One. Yeah.
Sorry, we should have
Yeah.
been clearer on that one.
Yeah,
so
Will
that you
gets
didn't have to sit through it.
Furiosa, and I get this trash is what I go for the extended movie
Hey.
here.
Yeah. So for the Highlander franchise, at least the 4 theatrically released movies, that gives our rating a score of 23 out of 100, putting this right at the bottom of the list. And I have to assume it's going to live there for a very, very long time. All right, I want to thank everybody for watching our rating. Did we get the video right? Do you think that this was the right score? Was it a little too high, a little too low? Let us know down in the comments below. And hey, if you made it this far in the video, you probably liked it. Might as well hit that like button, as it does actually help this channel out quite a bit. And if you want more great content like this, hit subscribe so you can see in the future when we make new videos. We record these videos live over at twitch.tv/TheMongoolie Show, so head over there and hit the follow button so you can hang out with us live and get your questions out on the air. Now, I also want to give a big shout out to Brian and Will, better known as Run7 and Cleaning Agent. I'll leave links to their Twitch and YouTube channels down below, so if you want to check out those guys and hang out with them more, you can absolutely do that. I also want to give a huge shout out to Jacob over at JBD Homes Productions, who edits these videos. We do our best to make the show fun for you guys, and he does his best to make it look good for you. So if you have any editing needs, reach out to him, let him know. I'm sure he'll be able to help you out with whatever your project is. Until next time, stay safe, stay well. Good night, everybody.